Wonderful, thank you very much. Well, if you have been following our program since this morning, we are rolling up to celebrate Africa's Day, that is May 25th. All through this week, we'll be running a series of shows intended to highlight Pan-Africanism, to tell the story of African struggle for emancipation, political emancipation that is now leading gradually to economic emancipation. Well, Africa Day started with the great son of Africa. His name is Kwami Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, when several African countries met in Accra to talk about African independence. Since that time, it has been happening every year. Today, we are pleased to have with us the Ambassador of the Republic of Ghana to Liberia, His Excellency Kodjo Wadee, and I hope I got that name pronounced well.
Wadee.
Wadee. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to talk about the role of Ghana, the Republic of Ghana in African liberation, specifically Nkrumah, and how he sees Africa's attempt to economically govern it. Ambassador, good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for accepting our invitation to this platform. How many years now have you been in Liberia?
I arrived in the middle of January last year, so a year and 4 years.
Okay, very well. So how have you been going?
Quite well, yes.
Are you enjoying it?
I am. I'm enjoying it.
Before you go, we'll find your Liberian name.
My pleasure.
That would be wonderful. So how do you feel? What do we do? What do you think? What's your perspective about African Liberation Day? What does it mean to you personally?
Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me to the studio to discuss this important subject. I think it's important that we know our history, particularly for the youth. It's important that they know how we arrived at this particular in our history. Wise people say, if you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going.
I agree.
And if you don't know where you're going, you won't get there.
Wisdom.
So I thank you for inviting me. This is a series of discussions leading up to Africa Day. So all around the continent, Ghana inclusive, series of discussions, public events, school debates, exhibitions, all to sensitize the public on the importance of Africa Day. And I'm happy that this nation has taken up that assignment and is pursuing it.
Okay, when we call the names of great Africans, we remember the name of Amilcar Cabral, we remember the name of Ahmed Sekou Touré, President Topman of Liberia, and of course Kwami Nkrumah will stand very tall for his concept of a united Africa.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your first president, Kwami Nkrumah, how he impacted African fight against colonialization.
Yes, thank you very much. Nkrumah was born on 21st September 1909. He hailed from very humble background. His father was a goldsmith, and his mother was a trader. He had his early education in his hometown in Nkrumah, in the southwestern part of Ghana, and then proceeded to what was then known as the Prince of Wales College, present-day Achimota College, where very good school that the British established, and had his secondary education. He graduated as a teacher, and then proceeded to the United States, where he studied at Lincoln University. He had a bachelor's degree in economics and sociology, and another degree in theology, and then had a master's of science in education from the University of Pennsylvania. During his time in the U.S., he involved himself with student activities, helped form the Black American Association for Students in North America and Canada. He also went around, particularly Presbyterian churches in Pennsylvania and New York, talking to people. And this is where he came into contact with some African American nationalists.
Okay.
Typical among whom was Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey had a substantial influence on Nkrumah's political thought.
Okay.
He also experienced some of the racism at the time, which was a bit of a contradiction because he saw America as this vast, confident continent, and yet people, particularly those of the black race, were suffering. And this made a profound impression on him. He also came into contact with another Trinidadian nationalist, C.L. James, who also had an influence on his political training at the time. From the US, he traveled to London, ostensibly to read law and to complete his doctoral thesis. But this is where he came into contact with another Trinidadian nationalist, John Padmore. And together, they organized the 5th Pan-African Congress. Now, Pan-Africanism and the congresses that had preceded the 5th was essentially one that Black American nationalists and Caribbean nationalists were used as a forum to advocate a betterment in the situation of the blacks in the American continent. But the 5th Congress held in Manchester in 1945 was one that brought African nationalists together. Nationalists born in Africa. So people like Hastings Banda, Malawi, Obafemi Awolowo from Nigeria, Chaga Wachukwu from Nigeria, and so forth, brought them all together. And for the first time, they tried to conceptualize how to prosecute the liberation of Africa, decolonization of Africa. And so that was a critical point in Nkrumah's political training, which spoke to his organizational skills. And organization was crucial for Nkrumah in his later political life. So essentially, this is the background of Nkrumah's formative years. From 1948, he was invited to go to Ghana to become the secretary of the UGCC, United Gold Coast Convention, which was a political party that had been formed up by some.
Who invited him? Ghanaians?
Yes. To become the general secretary, because obviously they had heard about him and his achievements in the UK. So he came down to Ghana as secretary. And then he started building a following. First of all, he found the UGCC a bit too slow for the kinds of ideas and vision that he had. He broke away from the UGCC and formed the Convention People's Party, the CPP, and launched what he called positive action to demand independence from the British. Positive action meant defying the British colonialists, boycotts and strikes, and this irritated the British. He was imprisoned, and while imprisoned, he won the general elections held in 1951. So the British were compelled to release him. and he continued his organization, bringing together youth groups, women, trade union, and so on and so forth. When he won the elections, he was appointed leader of government business.
Okay.
In other words, he became the head of government, although it was still
at that time Ghana was still on a colonial rule.
Still under colonial rule. And the agitations continued. He won another landslide elections in 1956, which was the elections that led Ghana to independence, 6th of March 1957. So that's how Kwami Nkrumah became Prime Minister of Ghana on 6th March 1957.
Wonderful. What does it mean for Ghana and the history of Ghana?
Well, he is our founder. He prosecuted the independence struggle for Ghana. He was able to conceptualize what the African black man, his situation at that point in time, the need to break the shackles of colonialism, the need for Africans to manage their own affairs. And he stands large among his African peers in this enterprise that he undertook. So for Ghana, Nkrumah has his role etched in history, and he is revered in Ghana up to this day.
Okay. What did he leave with Ghana and Ghanaians?
Yes, Nkrumah, in the initial years, elevated Ghana. The image of Ghana worldwide was very positive. Ghana was well known. It was the first country south of the Sahara to attain its independence. And it became the mecca for African nationalists who were still fighting for independence in their respective colonies. He extended a lot of assistance to these liberation movements. A lot of the nationalists, people like Robert Mugabe, Desmond Banda, all made Ghana their home for a while. And in so doing, he elevated the prestige and status of Ghana at that point in our history.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I want you to listen to him on the day Ghana declared itself, or Ghana got its independence. Kwami Nkrumah. Okay, I think that is the point. He said our independence, meaning the Ghanaian independence, was meaningless unless it is linked to the independence of the rest of Africa. I think it was this philosophy that pushed him and to organize the Organization of African Unity.
Yes.
And he was the proponent of the concept that all of Africa should be one.
Yes.
I think we gradually going towards that. We have the African Union. Ghana's and Nkrumah's call for Africa unity. Have we as a continent achieved that dream of Nkrumah?
Before I go to answer this, let me read a quotation from his book, I Speak of Freedom, that he explained his vision about Africa. And he said, "I have never regarded the struggle for the independence of the Gold Coast, the name of Ghana, as an isolated objective, but always as a part of a general world historical pattern. Africans of all the territories of this vast continent shall wake up, and nothing shall stand in the way of their fight for freedom. It is our duty, since we constitute the vanguard, to give all possible assistance to those currently waging battles that we have put on the right track. Our task is not done and our safety is not secured until the last vestiges of colonialism are eliminated from the African continent." So for him, the independence of Ghana was only a process. It gave him the platform from which to advocate the liberation of the African continent and also the unity of Africa. So there were twin objectives: liberation of the continent and unity of the continent. Now, he saw the United Africa to be one that was an organic union. An Africa with as one political entity, able to manage its own affairs from one point of view. Now, you know, Africa had been divided by the colonialists into colonial territories.
That's the Berlin 1885.
Exactly. Some managed by the French, the British, Portuguese, and so forth. Now, he saw this as a tactic used by the colonialists, imperialists, divide and rule. If we were divided, it was easy for them to rule us with the main objective of exploiting our natural resources, because that was the colonial arrangement. They took our natural resources back to the metropolitan capitals, London, Paris, Lisbon, for their industrialization. And he felt that this arrangement could not go on forever because it left us in perpetual poverty. And the need to reverse that. And that could only be done if African countries came together as one union, strong enough to be able to speak for itself, manage its own affairs, just as the colonial powers were doing. If we were, and he used the word balkanization. Africa was balkanized. That is broken down into small bits and pieces. We wouldn't be able to achieve that
objective.
Exactly. And therefore, that was his perception, his concept.
So he moved on to organize or lead the organization of the African Unity.
Exactly. And again, with Ghana as a platform, he decided now to put this vision into practice. And so soon after Ghana became independent, he moved to organize the first conference of independent African nations in Accra. This brought together the African countries that were independent at the time.
In 32.
No.
There were 32.
There were 7 actually.
Okay, the first meeting.
The first meeting is Ghana, Liberia, Libya, Morocco, Egypt, the Sudan, Tunisia, and Ethiopia. Now this meeting was the first of its kind of African countries on African soil, and was an extension of the Pan-Africanist movement that had taken place outside African soil, the last one being Manchester, that Nkrumah. So it became the first Pan-African conference to be held on the continent, bringing together various African countries. And it called for the observance of, in fact, this Africa Day that we going to celebrate on the 25th of March had its origins.
Okay. In that meeting?
In that meeting, they called for the observance of an African Freedom Day once a year to mark, and I quote, the onward progress of the liberation movement and to symbolize the determination of the people of Africa to free themselves from foreign domination and exploitation. And April 15th was
That's the original.
Yes, and that was Africa Freedom Day or African Liberation Day. This was before the OAU was formed on 25th May, and subsequently that date shifted to 25th May. So he held that first meeting and then followed this up with what the All Africa People's Conference. This brought together all the liberation movements to Accra to strategize on how to persecute the liberation agenda in their respective countries. Now, again, if you let me quote what Patrice Lumumba, the way he saw this conference, he said, this historical conference, which puts us in contact with experienced political figures from all the African countries, reveals one thing to us. Despite the boundaries that separate us, despite our ethnic differences, we have the same awareness, the same soul, plunged day and night in anguish. The same anxious desire to make this African continent a free and happy continent that has rid itself of unrest and of fear and of any sort of colonialist domination. And then he ended it by saying, down with colonialism and tribalism. Lumumba. So that particular meeting was an important psychological, political, and practical boost to the nationalist aspirations at that time.
Across the continent.
Then, being his organizational skills coming in, he reached out to other African leaders, including President Tubman, who then proceeded to convene a conference in Sanikeli that brought together Nkrumah and Secretary of Guinea. And at that conference, the communique issued what was called the Declaration of Principles. And they proposed the establishment of a community of independent African states with membership open to all independent African states and federations. So this was the first time they used the concept of a union, establish a community of independent African states. Then Nkrumah went further to organize a conference of all African trade union federations, because trade unions were part of the political struggle.
And they were very strong at that
Exactly. He also went forth to organize a conference of African women, even at that time in our history, when
so women have a role to play there.
Exactly, because again, he knew those who could, who
mobilize and do things.
Mobilize and prosecute this. Now, from the conference room, he decided to put his vision into practice. And a major step was taken when Ghana and Guinea, in November 1958, decided to form the Ghana-Guinea Union, with a charter of the Union of African States. And this was formally announced in May 1959, and he described it as the nucleus of a union of independent African states. And then later on, Mali joined this union. So the Ghana-Guinea-Mali Union was the first attempt at forming a union, an African union, and the hope was that this would be expanded for others to join in. Now, in 1960, several African countries gained their independence. That's the decolonization process.
That was the decade of independence.
Exactly, called the Year of Africa. 1960 alone, I think about 17 countries, including Nigeria and most of those in the French zone, attained their independence. Now, when they became independent, the debate on the political future of the continent then became broader and sharper. And it led to a polarization into two separate blocks.
We have the Casablanca and the Monrovia bloc.
Exactly. The Casablanca bloc were those who agreed with Nkrumah for Africa to become an organic union, single government. And the Monrovia bloc were those who argued that it should be done in a gradualist, functional approach. And these two groups, advocated strongly their respective positions, but all of them, both groups, were all in unison as to the necessity of a united Africa. The question was which approach to adopt. And that was where, therefore, the need for compromise came in. And
some writers say Nkrumah had an ambition of leading that union. This is why
the
Monrovia bloc were very cautious about his ambition.
You should understand, at the time, in the early 1960s, when these countries gained their independence, they were, they had to grapple with the difficulties and challenges of state building. So they were quite jealous of their newly found sovereignty. And some felt that Nkrumah was trying to push forward a hegemonist agenda where he wanted to lead, and they did not take much pleasure in that. So the debate went back and forth, but because they were all had a consensus of the need for Africa to come together, the compromises were made, and that led to the birth of the OAU in Addis Ababa on 25th May 1963. So the idea was that they would continue to work towards the political unity of the African continent. And we've been in that process ever since. Currently, the African Union
has replaced the
OAU, and it is also seized with that vision of a united Africa. But from the point of view where you have to develop a certain roadmap towards that objective, and part of that roadmap is strengthening the regional economic communities. And then from that, they are the building blocks, and from that you come to you're able to constitute the unity of the African continent.
Do you think we'll ever arrive at that? Where all of Africa can attain Nkrumah's dream of a united Africa?
It is a process. It is a process, and it is a daunting process, a challenging one, because as individual countries, we have to grapple. Since Nkrumah founding of the OAU until now, Africa has had to contend with a lot of issues: crisis, civil wars, economic problems, and so forth. And we're still grappling with those issues now. So there are those who would say that had Africa bought into Nkrumah's idea at that point in time, perhaps we would have been able to fashion out stronger union and deal with these issues of civil war, conflict, poverty, and so forth.
Okay.
But you should also understand that this was at the time, particularly
newly formed independence, everybody wanted to protect their sovereignty.
Exactly, and it was at the height of the Cold War, where the superpowers at that point in time had their interests on the African continent, and in fact worked against Nkrumah because it had these ideas taking root. It would have meant that the resources that they were getting from the continent would no longer have been on their own terms.
But we've come a long way, 50 years since we have the OAU last year. African political independence is not entirely, but the issue is the economic independence. Do you think colonization has totally wiped away? Or is in a different form now?
Well, yes, in a different form, and that is all Nkrumah's political philosophy of neo-colonialism.
Okay.
That rather than the type of colonialism on the eve of independence, it is in a different guise, form of multinational corporations, for instance, still
the World Bank behind
and so forth. African countries are, short of this organic union and managing their affairs as one single union, would have to come to terms with all of these things individually. And this is where, the story of the father who gave the broom to the son to break, and he broke it individual.
But he could not break it.
Exactly.
Altogether.
That is a very powerful.
But it's taken a long time. Africa has not been able to come together on this economic front.
Again, because we've managed our own affairs from the point of view of the individuals grappling with their own, sometimes even being repetitive of some of the problems and challenges and solutions that we've found over the years. It's going to take some time. And I think the certain new leadership that has also emerged on the continent that is seized with the essence of having to unite. You look at the other regions of the world, they're all coming together to prosecute their political and economic agenda as a single unit, the European Union, ASEAN countries, and so forth. So regional integration is a paradigm that we have to pursue at the present time.
You see, all the stock exchange in the world is occupied with Africa gold, Africa diamond, but yet still we have constraints in economic emancipation of Africa. For example, your country, Ghana, the European Union will accept your cocoa, but they will not help you to produce your cocoa into a chocolate, and they will not allow those things to be exported or imported into the European market because of trade barriers. Don't you think we will arrive at a point as Africa to fight for this economic emancipation, which is more relevant than even the political emancipation to me?
There's some truth in that. We have to take our resources, add value to it, negotiate favorable market terms, because they need the resources. They need the resources to industrialize, or to continually industrializing them. And we have to be conscious of that fact. Work out favorable arrangements that would ensure that the net benefit is to us as Africans, our people, because that's the way we get our resources to develop. Otherwise, if we export all our natural resources in their raw form, goes to the industrialized countries, and then they bring it back to us and sell it to us. Yes. So we should be able to.
So what do you think is Africa's problem? You think our problem is leadership?
Well, the early leaders who who led the country into independence had the challenge of still bringing their own individual nations together. So the challenge of nation building
was more paramount than the economic aspect.
Some more successful than others, and even up to now, we're still grappling with this particular problem. But as I said, gradually conflicts are becoming a thing of the past in the African continent.
So the dimension is changing. But when you listen to this leader I talked to a few years ago,
the MDGs were developed by experts in Europe and America, and we were not consulted. So they were very reductionist. It ended up being very, very minimum time for development because it came from some theory somewhere. We're not saying the MDGs are not a framework because it's wonderful to have one global framework that brings all stakeholders around one agenda. So the premise of the MDG is wonderful. But there are gaps, and those gaps is what has led us not to make the kind of progress we want. So this time we're saying, can you talk to those who are most affected by the MDGs? Can you talk to the poor so they can tell you what they need for their own life? And this is the bottom-up kind of consultation that has started, and between boys and girls. I mean, Africa's biggest problem, I think, is a leadership problem. And this is why, as we look after post-2015, we have to really think about who are those people that are going to take Africa forward. And this is where young people come into play. I don't know why, I don't know why young people don't always get into politics, for instance. Maybe because you think it's such a corrupt game and you think you leave it to the corrupt people. But we need more young people really entering into governance and government so that we change this cycle. We have very, very old leaders on this continent. I mean, people who were there 40 years. We know those leaders who have not changed power. And you can now see that leaders are starting to try to make, to remove term limits from their constitutions, etc. We have to find ways. I mean, if you look at the kind of resources we have that I mentioned earlier, we have so many resources, yet somehow we're not rich. So how are we managing those resources? And you can see that certain people are getting rich. So definitely there's some kind of governance issue there, that resources are only going to a few people and poorer people are getting poorer. That is a leadership problem. That is not it.
Okay, that is a leadership problem. You want to expand upon that? She's saying that we're not doing well with how we govern our people in Africa. This is why we have all these constraints.
Yes, but the truth is that if you look at Africa today, Africa, say 15, 20 years ago, there are more democratically elected leaders. They may not be a perfect situation, but we've moved from the days when Africa was noted more for
the credential democratically is growing.
And part of it is a generational change. You have a new generation of leaders who are much more conscious of the need to develop the country. The days of coup d'etats
it's not history.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this is a positive thing, and we have to build on it.
Do more.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you for being with us. Let's get some interaction from our listeners out there. 0777469794
and 0777469793.
And all throughout this week, we will be talking to ambassadors. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll have the ambassador of Cameroon here. On Wednesday, the ambassador of Nigeria will be here. On Thursday, the EU special representative will talk to us. And of course, on the Liberian angle, we'll have Dr. Ewudon to talk about Liberia's role in African emancipation. Good morning and welcome to the show. Good morning. Okay, I'll take this one. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Ali Silla.
Well, good morning, Judge. Good morning, His Excellency, the Ambassador of Ghana, President right there. Good morning, sir. This is Ali Silla, and I'm from South Street this morning. Thank you very much, everything, for educating the young people about the struggle of Africa in the 1960s and 50s. But you know, the month of May is a very important month, looking at the establishment of the South African Student Organization by Steve Biko, having really need the young people to be nationalists in terms of what is happening on the continent. But I've enjoyed the show, and thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. And I think we need to do more by considering our young people about the revolution of Africa to make sure that Africa becomes second to none on Earth.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You are very low. Are you there? Okay, I think we lost them. 07774697994 is the number to call. I'm going to take 2 more calls. Here we go. Yeah, sorry, let me get Mr. B and Kota on. Good morning, Mr. Kota.
Good morning, sir.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Ambassador.
Good morning.
Well, there's much you have to talk about, but you didn't really dwell on the external factor in the liberation movement, in the quest to unify Africa. I know that Patrick Lumumba, for example, most mysteriously disappeared mysteriously, let me put it that way. And
You're talking about the influence of the West in eliminating strong.
Exactly. Which of course, they just not allow us to achieve. The time for me, the time we will have achieved African unity was the time when Kwami Nkrumah was pushing for that strongly. One currency, one army, one government, one president. That would have been the best time. So, but Liberia played a major role in influencing that seriously, owing to the influence, So, I mean, the ambassador could kindly speak to this a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll talk about that a little bit. 07774697994. Good morning. Go ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning. And your name is? Okay. Oh, that's Deputy Minister Norris Tue. So
This, no, sorry. Call back. 07774697993. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, sir. My name is Kodjo Wadee. I'm calling from Ghana this morning.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, one question quickly. I want the studio guys to give his opinion on this saying that Kwami Nkrumah actually originated from Liberia.
All right. Thank you for your time. Let's go back to him.
The question of the external factors. I mean, quite obviously they were very much present, and I did mention the fact that these countries became independent at the height of the Cold War.
Okay.
And Africa was one of the battlegrounds of the Cold War. And that is why Nkrumah and like-minded leaders sought to establish linkages with other regions of the world. For instance, the Afro-Asian People's Organization was established to promote a certain level of cooperation between Africa and Asia, some of which countries themselves have been ex-colonies. But more importantly was the enterprise undertaken by people like Nkrumah and Nehru, was Tito, to form the non-aligned movement. A middle ground that would not, to offer a path of development that was not subject to the dictates of the Cold War protagonists, the East and the West. And of course, I mean, the issue at stake was Africa's raw materials and the
natural resources.
Natural resources which have been feeding industries in the West. And the colonialists, now imperialists, as Nkrumah find them, were not going to turn their backs and roll over for...
They will find different means.
So there were all kinds of different means to prevent that kind of movement towards a united Africa.
Okay.
And Nkrumah himself, if you read the records, was overthrown with complicity of certain Western countries.
And I understand some Ghanaians who got on the street were celebrating after the left.
Yes.
Why that anger after?
You can understand that. You see, the 1960s came with its own economic problems that brought hardship together. The price of our primary raw material, cocoa, had dropped substantially. World market, the scarcity of essential goods, prices were high, taxes were high. In other words, they were reacting to the economic reality. And of course, I mean, some felt that the period immediately before independence and immediately after. So Ghana was very well endowed. Our foreign reserves were quite substantial. The people who believed that a lot of it was dissipated in this quest for the liberation of Africa and African unity. So some of them reacted in that way and felt that the elimination of, but don't forget also that Ghana had turned Ghana into a one-party state. Political detention of political opponents was the
commonplace at the time.
So it was a reaction to some of these things, and people felt that with this elimination, things would turn. Of course, I mean, history proved that wrong.
Wonderful. Ambassador Wadee, we had a very insightful time. Thank you very much for talking to us on African liberation.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's how we bring down the curtains on today's presentation of the show. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll have the ambassador of Cameroon here. On Wednesday, the Nigerian ambassador will be here. And Thursday, the African Union representative will be here with us. On the Liberian side, Dr. Don and others will find time to talk about African liberation. I have been Mamadi Diakite, along with my friend and brother Solomon Well. Inshallah, we'll be here tomorrow with another show. Thank you, and please let us be good to ourselves.